the Inferno, the Ganges figures just once, and that too in a few lines. These lines, however, are pregnant in significance, for from this spot emanates the vision of purgatory and paradise. These few lines in the last canto of the Inferno give a crucial glimpse of Dante's purgatory.
When the great wings were opened wide enow, he clutched them to the shaggy-sided bust, and climbed from tuft to tuft down, slipping by between the matted hair and icy crust. When we were come to that part where the thigh turns on the thickness of the haunches' swell, my guide with effort and with difficulty turned his head where his feet had been. The fell he grappled then as one who is mounting, so that I conceived turning back to hell.
Here, the most important thing to note is the matted hair and icy crust. The matted hair is nothing but the jata of Shiva, while the icy crust clearly anticipates the full flow of the Ganges around the Mount of Purgatory in Purgatorio. In the last canto of the Inferno, when the poet is at the tip of purgatory, we read,
"Is still fixed as before, and doth not stir. He fell from heaven on this side, and there stayed. And all the land which e'er that stood forth dry covered itself with sea, by him dismayed, and came to our hemisphere. And him to fly, perhaps, what on this side is seen around, left its place here void, and shot up on high. There is a cave that stretches underground, far from Beelzebub as his tomb extends, known not by sight, but only by the sound of a stream flowing, that therein descends, along the hollow of rock that it has gnawed, nor falleth steeply down, but winds and bends. The guide and I, entering that secret road, toil to return into the world of light, nor thought on any resting place bestowed. We climbed, he first, I following, till to sight appeared those things of beauty that heaven wears, glimpsed through a rounded opening, faintly bright. Thence issuing, we beheld again the stars."
This passage is a crystal-clear picturization of the Gangotri Glacier in the Indian hinterlands of the Himalayas. It is from here that the Ganges starts to flow through a narrow, rocky passage. Now there appears a pertinent question. Did the exiled feet of the Florentine poet mount the spot? Before we find a clear answer, it might be worthwhile to compare Dante's diary with the diary of a modern-day mountaineer.
"Lord, this is a dreadful place. I began to understand why our ancestors pictured hell as cold. On a summer's day, perhaps, the deep valley could acquire grandeur and even charm. But this was mid-January, and night was falling. The wind increased in force and bitterness, veering from point to point in violent gusts, and all around us the cliffs turned menacing and sullen yellow. The two great glaciers ended in dirty snouts, faintly visible in the gloom, and other ice falls were clamped to chutes of fallen rock. Mist canopied the valley. There were no birds, no trees, no plants, no animals, and no people. Ahead of us, as we picked a path between ice-coated boulders, we could hear the increasing roar of a river, which rises 100 miles away to the east, forcing its way through the opposite cliff.
Now, for an answer to the question, we go to Canto 19, where Dante composes his Last Judgment. Here, the eagle speaks as with one voice proceeding from a multitude of spirits that compose it, and declares the cause for which it is exalted to that state of glory. It then solves a doubt which the poet had entertained respecting the possibility of salvation without belief in Christ.
A man is born on Indus banks, and none is there who speaks of Christ, nor who doth read nor write. And all his inclinations and his acts, as far as human reason sees, are good. And he offendeth not in word or deed, but unbaptized he dies, and void of faith. Where is the justice that condemns him? Where his blame, if he believeth not? What then, and who art thou, that on the stool would sit to judge at distance of 1,000 miles with the short-sighted vision of a span? To him who subtilizes thus with me, there would assuredly be room for doubt, even to wonder. Did not the safe word of Scripture hold supreme authority? O animals of clay, O spirits gross!
In these lines, the core of his last judgment is affirmed, condemning those on the stool to judge at distance of 1,000 miles with the short-sighted vision of a span. Implicit in this canto is a statement in an interrogative mask. How can a man of high moral integrity pass such judgment on events occurring at distant places without going to the spot, more particularly when experience is the principal instrument of creative thought and expression which Dante himself espouses? This question can be seen in a new light when we go back to Purgatorio at Canto 32, where Dante will be meeting Beatrice. The glorious lady of my mind was made manifest to mine eyes, even she who, called Beatrice by many, who knew not wherefore. The literal rendering of these words is, by many who knew not how she was called. The key to the whole passage is the meaning of the name Beatrice, meaning she who offers blessings. Here, in this decisive canto, Dante is dazzled to blindness for a while by the eyes of Beatrice, and becomes aware that the procession has wheeled round and is returning to face the sun. The griffin moves the chariot, and Dante follows it, with Matilda and Statius.
Mine eyes with such an eager coveting were bent to rid them of their 10 years' thirst. No other sense was waking, and even they were fenced on either side from heed of aught, so tangled in its customed toils that smile of saintly brightness drew me to itself. Through the high wood, now void, the more her blame, who by the serpent was beguiled, I passed, with step in cadenzito, the harmony, angelic. Onward had we moved as far, perchance, as arrow at 3 several flights, full-winged had sped, when from her station down descended Beatrice. With one voice all murmured, Adam. Circling next a plant despoiled of flowers and leaf, on every bough, its tresses spreading more as more they rose, were such as midst their forest wilds for height the Indians might have gazed at. Blessed thou, Griffon, whose beak hath never plucked that tree pleasant to taste, for hence the appetite was warped to evil. Round the stately trunk thus shouted for the rest, to whom returned the generation of the just are saved. And turning to the chariot pole, to foot, he drew it of the widowed branch, and bound there, left unto the stock whereon it grew.
Now compare this text with the story of the Buddha on his attainment of the goal of all goals beneath the Bodhi tree, that is, the tree of awakening.
Seeking the knowledge that should release all beings from sorrow, Gautama had come thus at last to the midpoint that supports the universe, which is expressed here in mythological terms. Otherwise, it should be taken for a physical place to be sought somewhere on earth, for its location is psychological. It is that point of balance in the form which the universe can be perfectly regarded. To man's view, things appear to move in time and to be in their character concrete. I am here, you are there, right and left, up, down, life and death. The pairs of opposites are all around, and the wheel of the world, the wheel of time, is ever revolving, with our lives engaged in its round. However, there is an all-supporting midpoint, a hub where the opposites come together like the spokes of a wheel in emptiness. And it is there, facing east, the world direction of the new day, that the Buddhas of past, present and future, who are of one Buddhahood, though manifest in series in the mode of time, are said to have experienced absolute illumination.
And through all this revolution, observes Joseph Campbell, the more one labours and broods upon its enigmatic fun for all, its here we are again gaieties, the more impressively and ubiquitously do the presences of HCE, here comes everybody, and ALP, Anna Livia Plurabile, come to view as the inhabiting, creating, supporting and disintegrating substance, consciousness and bliss of all things. Dante's idea of purgatory as the condition of a soul being purged of its pride and so ready to respond to the radiance of God's love is matched in the Orient by the idea of reincarnation. Through many lifetimes, release from egoism is achieved, and so from the sorrows of rebirth. Thus, Dante became the first European writer to break away from the Greek tradition of tragedy, to move into the Buddhist realm of gaining bliss through pain and sorrow. Finally, the deification of Beatrice is complete in Canto 11 of Paradiso. Here, while on earth men pursue their ambition in law, medicine, the priesthood, etc., Dante felicitates himself on being with Beatrice in heaven, where Dante is released from all worldly pains and enters into Buddha realm, the realm that was invented in the Mahayana version of the Buddha's life to provide a port of departure for Nirvana. This realm shows many points of resemblance to the Western concept of paradise. But reaching that realm is not conceived to be the ultimate aim of spiritual life, but the penultimate, next to the last. There are many such realms along the shore of the Sea of Void. Purgatory and reincarnation are thus homologous up to a point.
There hangs a rich slope of mountain high, whence heat and cold are wafted through Perugia's eastern gate, and Nocera with Gualdo in its rear mourn for their heavy yoke. Upon that side, where it doth break its steepness most, arose a sun upon the world, as duly this from Ganges doth. Therefore let none, who speak of that place, say Assisi, for its name were lamely so delivered, but the East, to call things rightly, be it henceforth style.
For a true Indian, the world is not enough, even at its best, even beyond its best. His paramount aim, therefore, is beyond this world. And yet, the creatures and doings of the world have for him a certain fascinating allure, which takes hold of his faculties like a snare. The forest, therefore, is the first resort of his yearning heart. But even the forest teaches delight. Hence, the doors of the senses themselves must be closed. Within, however, even the breathing teaches delight. And further within, let us seek and follow the yogi on his road of flame. Dante considers himself privileged to see the divine essence of the Bindu at the ninth heaven, that is, the mandala in paradise, Canto 28. I saw a point of so intense a beam that needs must every eye it blazes on be closed before its poignancy extreme. In Indian thought, Bindu means golden dot, the essence of energy. The Bindu symbolizes complete detachment from the body by either the male or the female, a precondition to be able to use the mind in other than habitual or known ways. When Shakti wishes to create, she divides herself in two. On the right, Bindu, male, Ham. On the left, Visarg, female, Sa. She divides herself into many. Therefore, as creator, I am also she. Hamsa, the combination of male and female, can be translated not as I am he or I am she, but I am that I am. Power manifest and power unmanifest in one. To attest the scope and span of the point, Dante uses a capital P and then continues, at such a distance round the point, perchance, as is the halo from the light which paints it, when most dense the vapour spreads, there wheeled about the point a circle of fire more rapid than the motion which surrounds Pedius the world. Another this enringed, and that a third, the third a fourth, and that a fifth encompassed, which a sixth next bound, and over this a seventh following reached circumference so ample that its bow within the span of Juno's messengers had scarce been held entire. Beyond the seventh ensued yet another two, and every one as more in number distant from the first was tardier in motion, and that glowed with flame most pure, that to the sparkle of truth, being most within its truth, I suppose fiery. And to measure their course each spark accompanied, the poet brings the story of the doubling of chessboard squares. According to Dante's scholars, the doubling of the chessboard squares alludes to the Indian inventor of chess, who asked from a king as a reward a grain of wheat doubled as many times as there were squares on the board. The king was amazed at the millions to which the number added up. In Dante studies, including Boccaccio's commentaries and the first biography of Dante, which he composed in 1350 AD,
Piazza Erbe is where Pietro Alighieri and Giovanni Boccaccio used to read the Divine Comedy to the people.
it is found that the poet used to carry discourses in various languages. If so, then the question arises, was Dante aware of the world's most spread-out language, Sanskrit? In the introduction to the English translation of the Upanishad, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, the philosopher, writes, "The Upanishads represent a great chapter in the history of the human spirit and have dominated Indian philosophy, religion and life for 3,000 years. Their thought by itself and through Buddhism influenced